Hey everybody, welcome back to Backlog Banter. Today we're talking about, believe it or not, Nintendo. It's almost like
What?
we chase the views, or I chase my hobbies, and all I do is talk about Nintendo. I'm pointing
Mm.
it off fucking frame again, but it's okay. The point is, folks, I was pointing not where things are, but where they're going to be, because today we're talking about
Ooh,
the future. As one
wow.
Wayne Gretzky said, or it might have been a different play. He says, skate not to where the puck will be, but where the puck is gonna be. I don't play hockey. I don't really know
That
the quote.
you messed up that quote so bad, but you know what? Nintendo doesn't care, and that's what we're talking about.
And maybe Nintendo messed up the future of the Nintendo Switch. Maybe that's what we're
Ooh.
going to discuss. But the overarching question, the essential question, the topic of the day, if you will, tots, the X's and O's of the show, if you will, to steal a more kind of funny phraseology. We're going to talk about something they talked about on Gamescast a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, that was a
What's
good
the future
topic.
of the Nintendo Switch? I didn't listen. I'm gonna be honest with you. I didn't listen. I just
I
didn't
listened
think
to
about
that
it.
as I was doing my 15-hour road trip from Texas to Lincoln, Nebraska. I had that podcast on in my as I was driving a big vehicle, you know? Not that you would understand anything about that, but
Yeah. I mean,
cars
I
exist.
don't. Yeah, I don't have the legal capacity to do that. But the fact is, Tucker, the Nintendo Switch, we both have one. We both play on it from time to time. Mine's on my bed. I can't reach it.
Aha.
But the fact is, it's there. And I really love the Nintendo Switch. I
I do
wouldn't
so.
consider it my favorite Nintendo system. We've talked about this in the past, but I would consider it to be one of my top tier systems. And I did say time and time again that by the time that the Switch's life is over, it very well could unseat the N64 as my favorite Nintendo console. Now, does that opinion immediately invalidate my whole fucking ethos? Maybe.
Yeah, probably.
Fact is, for me right now, it's N64, GameCube, Switch. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that the Switch could pop up to the top. However, we're in a little bit of a dark period right now.
Mm-hmm.
This right now is not 2017 Nintendo. It's not 2019 Nintendo. Some might even argue, myself included, it's not even 2018
No,
Nintendo,
it's
which
not.
which
Of
is
course it's not.
which was also a down year in a lot of ways. Right now, we're in a dark period, but I don't think that this is emblematic of the Switch's trajectory moving forward.
I don't
So,
think
what I
so
want to
either.
talk
No.
about today with my esteemed co host, the dignified speaker of the day, Tucker Hazel, is where we think the Nintendo Switch is going in 2021 and beyond. So, Tucker, I want to ask you this. I want to frame our conversation because there will be a point in our lives when something will replace a Nintendo Switch,
It's true.
right? Where do you think that fucking window is? Do you think it ends in 2021, 2022, 2023? Do you think that Nintendo is going to phase this out? How many years are we talking about here?
I think the Switch probably has, not including this year, because this year barely counts. All right, let's
Sure.
just get that out of the way. I think we've got 2 more years left. I think they're going to,
So it'd be a 5 year cycle.
yes, and I think that's reasonable because I think the Switch has been so successful that I think they're going to probably push forward making a next gen system, whether it is a Switch 2 or whatever, like some sort of more powerful hardware that is their successor to the Switch, that can compete. Because I do think that the Switch has been in a place for the last few years where it felt like it was behind because it was only getting some third party games, and a lot of people were confused or not really interested in those third-party games because they were in some ways downgraded. And even though it was a handheld experience that you could play, like, Doom and Wolfenstein on, the games were obviously compromised. But I think that we've sort of settled into a place where we know we can kind of get an idea of what third-party games are going to come to Switch and not to expect
Mhm.
anything huge. But I do think Nintendo will want to put something out there so we can get games on the Switch that are even just like from last year or this year, like sort of that range. But I don't think it's going to be competing. But I don't see the Switch handling itself for much longer than another 2 years because it is underpowered.
I think that the Switch. I think that for the sake of argument, the Switch 2 or the
Yeah.
fuck it, let's call it the NX. The
Ooh,
N
I like it.
the
Clever.
NX will launch holiday 2023 or
Ooh,
spring 2024.
wow. Okay.
And here's
Oh
the
my
thing.
God.
Yeah, I really think it's going to be a long one. And here's why. Nintendo's in an interesting position right now where this is their lifeboat. There is no handheld to hold them up. Nintendo has always been in a position where they've had two pillars, so if one was crumbling, the other stood tall. They were fine. Nintendo has one machine right now, and that machine happens to be doing incredibly well.
Yeah.
And the onus is really on Nintendo to move to a new system when their software stops selling. Because Nintendo is in a position where the fidelity of their hardware has never been a primary concern, and ever since God King Gunpei Yokoi instilled the concept of lateral thinking with withered technology in Nintendo's brand, or the concept of taking older technology and presenting it in a fun new way so that costs are lower and there's an innovative new way to play games, that's always been their focus, and that's the same with the Switch. For Nintendo to release a machine that is on parity or in a position where it can get even watered down versions of PS5, Xbox Series X games, that is going to be an astronomically expensive device if it's a hybrid system, because the handheld nature of the device inherently means to put that kind of power in, it's going to be more expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not going to be as sleek. So what Nintendo really has to do is stick with the Switch as long as the Switch is moving software, because that's Nintendo's bread and butter, right? They get a lot of money on the hardware sales because Nintendo sells hardware at a profit, but fucking 20 million copies sold of first-party titles across like 6 titles is a shit ton of money.
Yeah.
The Switch's attach rate is incredible. Its install base is incredible, and both are growing rapidly. So the onus is on Nintendo to only jump ship when they no longer can sell first-party software.
Yeah.
And I think that with the install base, that's going to last them for a while. And Nintendo's, if you look backwards, the Wii U clearly was not ready to launch, but they had to launch the Wii U because the software sales for the Wii fucking plateaued. Nothing was selling by holiday 2011. Nothing was selling. Skyward Sword did not move the units they wanted it to move.
Yeah.
And there was the impetus on them then to release the Wii U. So if Nintendo can keep the momentum high with first-party software, with an attractive device that gets indie support, that gets a stream of good games, I don't think you jump ship until the last possible moment. And I think they can ride this out for a long time. I'm anticipating finishing undergraduate college education before I have to buy another Nintendo system.
Wow, yeah. I mean, you're pulling these big boy words like impetus and onus, and you've got these buzzwords that are really compelling me to agree with you. Although I do think that the kink in the wrench, or I
I like
don't
when you
work
get
with
kinky, so
machines.
take me down this path.
I don't work with machines, but sometimes there's kinks and wrenches. Who knows? But
The
the
kink in the
wrench,
hose or the wrench in the machine.
the wrench in the monkey, if you will, that I think might upset your bucket of bolts you got is that, I mean, I feel like they have to release Switch upgrades, and I think at that point it almost acts. Depending on how powerful they are, I think it almost acts as a next gen console, because if they're going to be, there's no way they go back to home consoles after this. So if they release a more powerful Switch, it kind of is a next gen console, depending on how powerful they want to make it.
That's an interesting point, and that's what a lot of people are writing on. But I think, obviously, I don't know, you don't know, but what I can do is I can project backwards. And I think the most telling things are the DSi and the new 3DS.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in both cases, those devices were more powerful machines, but marginally so.
Yeah, not by much.
What they really did was iterate on the quality of life features and the usability, the user experience.
Yeah.
So I really do think we will get a new Switch model, probably holiday next year, but it's not going to push fidelity. I think it's going to push a clearer screen, maybe a 1080p screen, Bluetooth, less bezel on the device, longer battery. Maybe they even do a 3G model to really allow you to play those online games, out and about, and really fulfill that promise. Because people detest, like, you can play Splatoon 2 over your mobile hotspot and not use much data. I could easily see Nintendo in Japan and here in the States partnering with a Verizon or whoever the fuck. I don't know any of the providers in Japan, believe it or not. But I could see something like that. I can see them pushing the user experience and making the Switch's experience better and upping the horsepower a little bit to maybe where you play your games at 1080p handheld, something like that. But not anything that's going to fundamentally change the way that you play Switch games and fundamentally change what can come to the console, because I just don't see any historical evidence of that. Maybe we'll get a couple, let's call it, for the sake of argument, the new Switch. I hate that name, Super Switch, whatever you want to call it.
Ooh, that's a pretty good one. Super Nintendo Switch. I'm down for a Super Nintendo Switch.
That's honestly a phenomenal name. But like, you get your Xenoblade Chronicles 3D. I don't know what we get, fucking whatever. A couple games. But Nintendo, I think is smart enough to recognize, as they have in the past with the very few DSi exclusives, the very few new 3DS exclusives, that you need to make those owners feel like you got something special, but not split that player base. Because that, I think, is a big misstep.
Yeah.
And I especially think Nintendo's still in a position where they had a wonderful success with the Switch, but it's coming after a series of depreciating machines. Other than the Wii's spike and the Switch's spike, it's been a steady decline in home console sales and even handheld sales that have always been much more impressive, but still on a decline or a stagnation
Yeah.
relative to each other. So I think Nintendo realizes that they can't do anything that could possibly jeopardize, you know, the health of their ecosystem. So I don't think you split the player base. I think that we get a new Switch model, but not one that functionally, that fundamentally makes the machine and its ecosystem more powerful.
Yeah. Moving on from hardware, I think what really is more fun to speculate about and what will, get us the clicks is games. What the heck's coming out, I am in the position where, and this is not an unpopular opinion, but I think Nintendo started the Switch off so strong with genre-defining games and series-changing games, Breath of the Wild, Mario Odyssey, and even to some degree, Pokemon Sword and Shield not too long ago, that these games are going to be getting sequels. We already know about Breath of the Wild 2. I can't see a world where we don't get a Mario Odyssey 2. That game is so creative, is so unique. There's so much potential for new captures, for new kingdoms, that they have to make a sequel for it, especially because that game did get DLC. The next Pokemon generation. I think there's a world where we get a Mario Kart 9 or a Nintendo Kart or whatever. But I think the Switch has a second life in it because they started off the system so strong. You get all these big games right out of the gate. You get a couple down years, and then bam, they hit you with the next iterations of all those that really do show what the Switch is capable of, even in its aging years.
I think I think you're right, and I think you're right for a couple of reasons. I don't think you're right about all of that. I don't think we're getting Odyssey 2. But put a pin in that.
Ooh, I disagree.
Uh, but the Switch is following the pattern that Nintendo has always followed of every other generation after a jump being more interesting. So what I mean is when Nintendo is working in the late 80s, early 90s, more pixel-based games, the NES is the proving ground where they learn the tools. The SNES comes along, they iterate, and they really nail the 2D gameplay that they began. They perfected what they had the previous generation. They took what they'd learned and they made it excellent. And there's no competition if you're looking at which library is stronger, which one shows more, mastery over design. Then you look at the N64. They learned 3D design, but they didn't nail it. The GameCube comes along and they improve on all of their ideas. They make really interesting, unique software. The Wii is a weird one where again they're working more in the area of gimmick. That was more of an offshoot. But then you look at the jump from standard definition to HD, and clearly that fucked them over. There was a lot of delays. There was a lot of lacking software on the Wii U because Nintendo openly said that they did not have the experience with HD development they needed to really have a robust lineup of software on that system. They've talked about that. In the Switch generation, we're seeing them capitalize and be confident in their tools and confident in HD development and confident in their ability to once again, realize the visions they have.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there's no reason to not expect the Nintendo franchises that have not come over to get the series-defining games that others have. Luigi's Mansion 3 is the best Luigi's Mansion game. Mm-hmm. Breath of the Wild, not my favorite, but you can make an argument that is the best Zelda game. You can make the same argument for Odyssey. You can make the same argument for a lot of franchises, Animal Crossing. There's a ton where Nintendo has just taken their skill set and really confidently applied it to reimagining franchises. So I think that the future of the Switch is to continue to do that with the series that have not yet had that treatment.
Interesting.
I think that sequels. Let's talk about your sequel point for a second.
Yeah.
I think obviously we're going to get sequels, but Odyssey in particular, I don't think we're going to get a sequel to, because Odyssey is a moment in time where we're seeing a changing of the guard, and we're seeing Koizumi step into that directorial role, and we're seeing a younger Nintendo team take on Mario. And that younger Nintendo team has a creativity about them that I think gains them a lot of cachet in that scene and lets them make a game like Odyssey and then say, we have all these ideas, but we can put those ideas in the framework of a brand new Mario experience. I actually
Sure.
think it's far more likely, considering now we're 3 years out from Odyssey without Odyssey DLC or a tease of a sequel. I think it's far more likely that they're working on a new 3D Mario game that is entirely new, because
Sure.
Odyssey was entirely new, and that is a team that's the team that got the story in Galaxy. Koizumi got Rosalina's story in Galaxy. He is a creative man. He is one of the most creative people that Nintendo has, and I don't think that the Nintendo that said, okay, here's Galaxy 2, here's New Super Mario Brothers, here's New Super Mario Brothers Wii to you.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
a different Nintendo and a different leadership and a different philosophy than the leadership and philosophy that brought us Odyssey. So I do think we're going to get more 3D Mario, but I don't think it's going to take the form of an Odyssey 2.
So Odyssey is obviously the one where we disagree the
Yeah.
most. But I do think that what you're saying still supports my original argument, is that they come out of the gate so strong with the Switch and all these series-defining titles that whether it be direct sequels or not, these series are going to get new entries that,
Yes.
while they won't be as genre-defining, like the next Mario game won't be as crazy as the jump from 3D World to Odyssey. There's no way, but I think that's okay because I think it'll still be a fantastic game. If we get a Breath of the Wild 2, it doesn't change the formula, but it continues the trajectory. I think the continuation of the trajectory for all these series is what's really going to be important. I think we're getting an ARMS 2. I think it'll fix the issues that the first one had and show that the series has potential to continue. I think that we're obviously going to get more Fire Emblem games that, while Three Houses was a big step from what, Fates to Three Houses,
Yeah.
or I guess Shadows of Valentia, whatever, to Three Houses, that was showing that Fire Emblem can be something a little more, and I think that they're going to perfect that and show that they can work better in these higher quality textures and things of that nature. I think that Pokemon, we've talked ad nauseum about this, but I think Gen 9 is going to be what really proves that Game Freak can make a home console Pokemon game. I do think we get a new Mario Kart. I do think that these games that came out at the start of the Switch's life cycle are going to be getting a new life with new entries, and I think that is really going to be where the Switch shines. I don't really agree with you in the idea of the Switch bringing in new series and redefining them. I think there will be a few, but I really don't see that being the focus because these games have been so successful, and continuing the trajectories of these newly changed series is going to be where they see the most success.
I think you're right in some respects and wrong in others. I think the respect you're really right in is that we're going to see a lot of teams like Intelligent Systems, like Game Freak, even HAL Laboratories with Kirby, not release what
Star
feels like in
Wars
many
was
ways.
not an
No, no, but
evolution of the Kirby
no, but
series.
that's what I'm saying. Because I also don't think that Sword and Shield or Fire Emblem Three Houses in major ways were either. Those all, to varying degrees of quality, felt like stopgap games. They felt like, okay, we're getting our feet under us, but this is not the next step for the series. Fire Emblem Three Houses is a really fun and really interesting game, but that could have worked on 3DS in a lot of ways. You could have paired back those systems, and that could have been on an older machine. My point is, from a fidelity perspective, from a design perspective, those teams got something out that spoke to people, but didn't show their complete potential. And that excites me, especially in the case of Game Freak and in the case of Intelligent Systems, because I think both of those games, Pokemon Sword, which I think gets a lot more hate than it deserves, and Three Houses, which is just a renowned title, seeing them expand on those and really get their feet under them and put a game out that looks and feels and plays like a current gen game on Switch is going to be incredible.
Yeah.
So I think you're right in that respect. But I think it's a mistake to count out Nintendo's unceasing desire to continually innovate with software. And I think that the Switch is in an interesting position where we're seeing a coalescence of home console and handheld development. And I think that lends itself to certain types of games we have not seen represented. So what I mean by that is we have a lot of large scale experiences. We got our Breath of the Wilds and our Odysseys, and our Animal Crossing, New Horizons, and all these games that are big in scope. What we don't have that made the 3DS such a special ecosystem, same with the GBA, whatever handheld you want to talk about, was the smaller experiences. We don't have a WarioWare or a Rhythm Heaven-esque game that succeeds in those shorter play styles, those shorter
Sure.
bursts, and those teams still exist. So I think it's a very hard proposition to look at the WarioWare team and say, here's a Joy-Con, but you're not making a WarioWare game with that.
Yeah.
You know, Nintendo's in the position now where they can take the franchises that have been smaller and put them on a scale, on a stage that they've never had before.
Sure.
So I think we will see things like Rhythm Heaven, WarioWare come back to fill that niche of the more handheld-centric experience and propel those franchises to new heights. Because this is a console that is making A-list games out of B-list, C-list franchises.
Sure.
Look at Xenoblade. Look at the success of the Xenoblade franchise on Switch. Look at Splatoon. Splatoon was successful on Wii U. It's a 10 million unit seller on Switch. So I really think Nintendo is going to go back to those franchises that they have that are more dormant and reinvent them and put them in front of a hungry audience. And I think there's even chances that we see things like F-Zero and Star Fox and fucking the discussion that will happen when Star Fox or F-Zero gets announced for Switch is going to be fucking bonkers. But I do think that with Nintendo's new capital, Nintendo is the most profitable company in Japan right now. That was just released. They have so much fucking capital at their disposal and so many teams. Those teams have to be making games.
Yeah.
So I think it's a lot easier right now when Nintendo is in such a dominant position to say, you know what, we are going to take a risk with this team on F-Zero. Because we pitched F-Zero on Wii U. We pitched to teams. We didn't have anything. We were in a position there where we couldn't take a risk. Now we can take a risk.
Sure.
So I think that the latter years of the Switch are going to be Nintendo swinging for that next Odyssey success, the next Breath of the Wild success, the next Animal Crossing New Horizons success, which really did come out of nowhere to an extent. That was always a big franchise, but it has never been as astronomically big as it is now.
Sure.
So I think Nintendo can find one of those in an F-Zero, in a Star Fox, in a WarioWare, in a Rhythm Heaven, in a fucking Chibi Robo. Who knows?
Yeah.
I think Nintendo is in a much stronger position to innovate and iterate than ever before.
I mean, you are a man of many words. You're not a man of few words. That's no one would ever say that about you.
Right.
But you use those many words in very elegant ways, and I do think that you managed to make good arguments. I honestly am starting to come around to what you're saying, and I do think we honestly agree more about a lot of things than maybe our initial arguments, come off as. When it comes to series that have been dormant that can be reinvented on the Switch, I do agree with you. I do think that they're coming. However, I think the point I was making earlier is that the real second breath of the Switch, the second life of the Switch, the one-up, if you will, the fairy bottle of the Switch, is going to come in the sequels to the games. I think that that success will come with a slew of reinvention of smaller series, but I don't think that those are going to be the ones that really define what the Switch is. And where it goes in the future. I think obviously it'll be a new breath for those series. I think that if we get new, I've never played a WarioWare game. I have Rhythm Heaven. I've played for fucking maybe 40 minutes. I don't know. I've never played F-Zero. I've never played Star Fox. All these series that I want to get into, that I really hope get new breath on the Switch. I just can't see being the new Megaton hits. I think those series are designed for a more niche audience, and I think that I really hope that they come out, and obviously I'll be playing them, but I really don't see those being the one that pushes the Switch to new heights. But if we get a Mario Kart 9 and we're getting Breath of the Wild 2, and we get Metroid Prime 4, which we haven't even touched on, or honestly, who knows what the Splatoon series holds? Do you think there could be a Splatoon 3 on the Switch?
I think Nintendo shot themselves in the foot by saying that Splatoon 2's post-launch support was going to end at a certain date.
Yeah.
I really think that there's a real possibility that we'll get to that. That there'll be the news will be conveyed that Splatoon 2, actually, guys, here's a paid season of content.
Oh, interesting.
Either that or Splatoon 3, because you don't just say, okay, we sold 10 million units, let's not make another Splatoon game.
Yeah.
You don't do that. But I think it was short-sighted to cut support for that. Because I think Splatoon should have been a platform. The same way that Smash Brothers is a platform.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're obviously not getting another Smash on Switch. It's just not going to happen. Because
it's not necessary.
It's not necessary because it's been designed in a way that it can transcend its launch and have a tail beyond its launch window. And Splatoon had that, but they cut it short arbitrarily.
Yeah.
So in my heart of hearts, soul of souls, is Splatoon 3 or more Splatoon 2 content? It's more Splatoon 2 content because that is a from a developmental standpoint a cheaper way to get in. You're not splitting a player base that way. I really think that they're just like, yeah, guys, we're calling to fucking use a football term I don't understand. We're calling an audible. We're gonna have more.
I don't even know what that means.
Yeah, I don't really either. But we're gonna have more content in this game. I think that's just smart. I think that's smart politicking and smart business.
Sure. You got more to say?
Metroid Prime 4.
Oh, okay. All right. Let's go for it.
Um,
I'll pet my Super Nintendo Mini because I don't have any Metroid memorabilia.
Metroid Prime 4 is probably the Breath of the Wild for the Switch. Not in terms of quality, but in terms of the fact that it's either the swan song or the cross-gen savior. It's something. But
Okay.
it is not a game that's just going to come out. It's not the holiday 2021 game, is what I'm saying. It's going to be an 11th hour Switch release because nothing to me communicates any kind of confidence or any kind of progress being made on this game, which sucks for a number of reasons. But it's important to remember that Retro is not what Retro was when they made the first 3 Prime games. That's a different team
Yeah.
with a different skill set. The fact that they're hiring so many fucking people this late into the game, or late in our context, early in their context, says to me that Retro is a name and not a team anymore, and that they're going to retrofit Retro with a new talent that can carry the torch of what they used to be. I'm not saying Retro is a bad team, because I think every game Retro has put out is fucking awesome. But I'm just saying that clearly shit has not been going well at Retro since 2014.
Yeah.
And reports suggested that it's not. And everything we're hearing communicates that things aren't going well. So while I am very bullish on the future of the Switch, I'm very bearish on the prospects of Metroid Prime 4 in particular.
Mm-hmm.
The game's going to come out. It will come out.
Yeah, it will come out. Hopefully it's the greatest Metroid ever made. I don't know.
It's hard to top Metroid Fusion. It's hard to top it. We're embedding a dangerously hot Metroid take deep into this discussion, which I really like.
Yeah.
So what other software do you want to talk about? Are there more particular games you want to talk about? Because I've got more to say, but software-wise, not as much.
So this is something that I started doing back when the Switch came out. Is I have a list on my notepad called Big Switch titles, and I have each year broken down into what I consider like the big A tier games, and then the B tier games, which are the smaller ones, and also ports. So
sure,
looking at these lists, I have obviously 2017, 18, 19, and then 2020 is a little weird because I preemptively added Bayonetta 3, Bravely Default 2, No More Heroes 3, New Pokemon Snap. Like those games we thought were coming
will not
this
come
year.
out in 2020.
Yeah, and Bravely Default I think might, but it's not going to have the impact. And New Pokemon Snap is possible, but who knows? But looking at some of these, I mean, there's series that we haven't touched on, such as what's coming up from the Yoshi series. I mean, Crafted World came out, and even like things like Mario Tennis Aces or Super Mario Party. I mean, there's no way Super Mario Party 2 doesn't happen. That listens to the comments of the first one. I mean, there's no way.
The fact that Super Mario Party 2 isn't out yet is kind of strange to me, but I'm certain it's being worked on. I need to do a little bit of research on the fly. You keep talking now.
Okay, all right. Other games that we have neglected thus far. I mean, we really didn't touch too much on Smash. I do think that, honestly, I think it's possible we get a season 3 of content. I don't know if I think it might be a smaller thing, but I think that Smash being what Smash is, I think it's possible that it continues to grow even further past what we have planned.
Well, I want to stop you there for a second because I want to talk about Yoshi and Smash Brothers in the same breath.
Okay.
So Crafted World was developed by Goodfeel, which I just want to double check because I thought, but I wasn't positive. Goodfeel is not just the Yoshi team. They made fucking Epic Yarn, right?
I don't know. Yeah, I think so. Maybe. You're the one with the research in your hand right now. If you're looking at Goodfellas, you can see what games they developed.
Yes, they did. Okay, thank you. The point is, they're a team that's more versatile. Like, they're not just the Yoshi guys.
Sure.
So I think we see Goodfeel take on a different project, and that's what I want to see Sakurai do. I don't want him to do season 3 of of fucking
Smash Ultimate.
Smash Brothers.
Yes.
Smash Ultimate. If you want to do a Smash Season 3 and Sakurai has I'm sure he has a protege. I'm sure he has a right-hand man.
Sure, yeah. Actually, that would be a great idea. You know what? You've gotten me even more excited.
Because Sakurai is a visionary.
Oop, we're cutting out. The hourly cutout is back. You just cut out. We're on the thing. Let's wait for the second time. It's coming. It's gonna happen. All right, it happened.
That you were right.
And we're back. All right, I predicted it.
Okay. But what I was saying was that Sakurai is a visionary, but also a workaholic, and he needs to take a break from Smash Brothers.
Of course, yeah.
So I think the right thing for him to do is to train up a protege and have them take over for the tail end of support, because the game is too successful to have only 2 seasons of fighters. What I like to see Sakurai do is take on a new project. Take a break, relax, charge, come back and do something different. And I don't want it to be Kirby Air Ride 2. I don't want it. By the way, the proper title for Kirby Air Ride is Kirby Air Ride. It's not Kirby's Air Ride, and that makes me very upset. In Japan, it is Kirby's Air Ride, but in Japan, Air Ride is one word.
Okay.
I don't like any of that.
Very strange.
But I don't want him to make a sequel.
I've never played that game, so I wouldn't know.
It's fine. I don't want him to make sequels to any of those things. Not even Kid Icarus. I want him to take another Nintendo franchise out of nowhere and make something fucking wild and different.
Sure.
And I think that we have an opportunity for him to do that. So for a lot of these cases, I want to see sequels, but I also want to see these teams tackle different projects.
Yeah. Another thing that I don't think we talked about, I mean, I think this is where you were leading with teams that are established taking on new projects. One of the big ones for me, thinking back to even pretty early in the Switch's life cycle, early 2018, late 2017, is that our good friends over at the Xenoblade team are working on a new big open world game that has, I can't remember what the theme was, medieval or something like that. But that is something that could be pretty big now that Monolith Soft has obviously established themselves with 2 big entries on the Switch, which have both done very well. And in the same breath, these teams that are less talked about, but I think could continue the Switch's success forward, come from third-party companies that are developing exclusive for Switch. I think a Mario and Rabbids sequel, I think that's coming. I do think that, even if Camilla was just skirting around, I do think that an Astral Chain 2 is certainly possible. And even in games that came over in ports, I mean, a next Pokken, another Captain Toad. Like, these series have potential to grow past just being the same game ported over, and seeing sequels to those, I think, is continuing my idea of the sequels being where the Switch finds a success. I think that those games, now that they've established themselves on the Switch, even just through ports, seeing new games in those series, I think, is definitely going to be something I'm looking forward to.
The other thing I agree with all that. One thing I want to see Nintendo's support teams make full games. So what I mean by that is I want to see Grezzo not remake Skyward Sword. I want to see them make their own 2D or 3D Zelda, because they have the skill set. Nintendo has teams like Grezzo that they've basically been grooming to make remakes. We saw them do, Ocarina of Time 3D, Majora's Mask 3D. We saw them do Link's Awakening on Switch. So I want to see them do a new Zelda game. Let Aonuma focus on 3D Zelda. Let him make the fucking crazy sequel to Breath of the Wild he wants to make. And let a different team take on, the 2D Zelda IP. I want to see more of that. I want to see Nintendo give their IP to teams that make sense, like Ubisoft. Let Monolith do something totally different, or let them have full lease on a different first-party franchise.
We do know that they're already working on a new IP, like big open world game.
Right.
That's already happening. Yeah.
Yeah, but they're also a very prolific team. They've got sub teams within Monolith. They're very big.
Yeah.
And then one of Nintendo's few Western teams also, which is really interesting. But they worked in support roles on Breath of the Wild and Pokemon Sword. Yes. Can you imagine if Monolith by themselves made one of those games or a different established IP? There's just so much room for Nintendo to collaborate creatively.
Yeah.
But I mean, we could talk ad nauseum about games, but I kind of want to talk a little bit more about like software initiatives and communication and things like that. Unless you have more you want to say about games.
I think I've had my fill.
So I think that there's two big. I think there's two big and beady questions.
Easy.
How is Nintendo going to communicate information to the audience, and how are they going to improve the user interface and user experience of the Switch?
Okay.
I think those are two big questions. I think it's easier to tackle the UI UX question. They're not going to. um, it's functional, and I think they recognize that it's functional, and they recognize that people are know that there's not more, not that shit is broken. Because for as fun as the Wii U's user interfaces or the 3DS user interfaces, they're fucking slow, like really slow.
Yeah.
And it's disappointing to me that Nintendo can't find a middle ground there. I would like to see folders. I'd like to see home themes. I'd like to see background music. I'd like to see deeper integration of features. But I don't think they're going to touch the user interface. I've long since given up the ghost that's going to happen.
Yeah, no, I don't. I sincerely doubt it. I've honestly doubted that from the beginning. Maybe that's because I don't have an issue with the Switch's interface. I don't particularly have. I've never used a theme before. I don't care about the background music. Never used folders before. So I mean, the Switch's bare bones interface works perfectly for me, and I have absolutely zero complaints. It might become something I use if they were to be like, hey, here's themes, but doesn't mean anything to me. I know I'm in the minority there, but I never had help for that from the fucking beginning.
And it kind of comes back to a quote that Colin Moriarty says often that I really like. He's like, if my fucking PlayStation looked like a cardboard box, I wouldn't care because it's about the games.
Yeah.
And I think to a certain extent that's true with these more software level initiatives. I do think that things like folders should be there. I think there are certain organizational and curatorial features that should be here. I think a more robust messaging system should be here.
Yeah.
More aesthetic things, well, I think they'd be nice and give it more of a Nintendo feel when you turn on your machine. I just don't think they're going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
They would have happened.
Yeah, exactly.
It's importing PNGs, and it hasn't happened.
Yeah.
But I think the last thing I want to touch on, and I know we're cutting a little close on time, is are directs done? Are they dead? How is Nintendo going to communicate with us? Are they going to hire a competent Twitter social media presence? Are they going to do anything? That's I think one of the most interesting question marks for the future of the Switch's life.
Yeah. I mean, we are either a week away or less from the 1-year anniversary of the last official Nintendo Direct.
It was today.
Oh, well, that's less than a week. But yeah, it's a special anniversary. Not a good one, but it's a special one.
I'm frankly not a fan of talking about things I don't really have much of a perspective on, and I don't have a perspective on this because this is just a puzzling development.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really see any rhyme or reason to how Nintendo's communicating, and for me, this is the most open-ended aspect of speculating about Nintendo's future. Because I don't know. It's just fucking tiring. I'm just tired of it. I don't know how they're going to talk to me. They're just not going to, maybe. Maybe fucking we'll wake up one day and the Mario 3D remasters will just be on the eShop.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like the thing is that's not even out of the question, which makes it really hard to talk in a more authoritative or even a more speculative way about what's going to happen with their communication, because clearly they don't know either.
Yeah. Which is it's a little scary to think about, but
I think it's only scary to think about when we're in the context of a time when the software seems to also be faltering.
Mm-hmm.
If this was happening in 2019, where we had games coming out every month, every other month, and there's stuff to look forward to, that's a different conversation. Because like we did have some direct drafts at the very beginning of that year. They skipped the January presentation and just dropped one in fucking February.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, here you go. But it ended up being okay because we're like, oh, we've got Luigi's Mansion 3 in the pipeline, and we've got in the pipeline, all of these things. So it's just very curious, and that is, I'm very, very optimistic about the Switch's future.
So am I.
Very optimistic.
I kind of hinted at this the other day, is that I do think that this down year might end up being beneficial to the Switch because this completely vapid absolutely nothing this year there's no way that it doesn't lead to a relatively good stream of games coming out next year. If we were supposed to have, I don't know, just throwing it out there, Bayonetta 3 or like, No More Heroes 2 are also 3. Yes. All these games this year, and they're not coming out this year, but they're ready / close to ready. that means they're going to come out next year. And that also means that those will be on top of, like, that's not going to be the big hitters. Bayonetta 3 and not Metroid, fucking No More Heroes 3 aren't going to be the big hitters, but they're going to be surrounded by, hopefully, all other larger games, which means we're going to be getting consistent flow, reminiscent of 2019 or 2017, of this flow of games that'll be coming in. And I think it'll reinvigorate people's hope for Nintendo's future. Because having this down year, if it means that we get a year and a half to 2 years of relatively consistent game output of quality stuff, I think that that's actually going to end up being a benefit.
The only cause for concern is if it comes to fall 2021 and we're in the same position, which I don't think we're going to be.
Oof. God,
But
that would be bad.
that's where the cause for concern is. I think that Nintendo's silence creates a self-fulfilling prophecy of the Nintendo community needing something to talk about. So they talk about the immediate conditions, which are not good. And I think that causes people to look less favorably on the larger context of the Switch's life or whatever, or Nintendo as a company. But I think we just call this what it is, which is a bad year.
Yeah.
But great systems have bad years. And I think that you don't make predictions based on outliers to your data set, and this is an outlier to the data set.
Yep.
So if we're in this position next year, then it's a different conversation.
Good. That would be so bad.
But I
Oh, God.
I am deeply optimistic that we're not gonna be.
Mm-hmm. So, here's my closing thoughts. All right.
Okay.
We're gonna do cinematic parallels. All right. You opened this discussion with your description of what the Nintendo Switch is to you, and it's your third favorite console, and that's totally fine.
Yes.
You've got these fucking weird ass consoles with 4 or 5 good games on them that you just love. All right. But the Nintendo Switch for me is the most important console I've ever owned. It's my favorite console I've ever owned by a pretty significant margin. I've never once in my life bought this many games on any other system. I've never played this many games as I had in any other system. I've never loved this many games as I have on the Nintendo Switch. Breath of the Wild, Mario Odyssey, Splatoon 2, Xenoblade Chronicles 2, Three Houses, ARMS. I mean, my top 100 list is just filled with games I either played on Nintendo Switch or only on Nintendo Switch. It's my favorite console of all time, and I'm not ashamed to say that. I'm not as disappointed with this year as maybe I should be, because I am so optimistic for the future, and because I have such confidence in the fact that these games are going to be getting sequels, and that the Switch does have a round 2 in it of hype and of consistent release schedules and of great games. And if I can get that, and this will, I mean, it's already cemented as my favorite console of all time, but I really think that it'll end up pushing it over for even more people. I mean, hopefully for you, it doesn't bother me if it doesn't, but it's certainly possible / not possible. I mean, but I'm very happy with the Switch as it is. I'm not happy with this year, but I am not worried about the future because I have seen that there is potential for the Switch to be great, and I think it will continue to be great. I just think that this is, this is a schmunk year.
And yeah, everyone has schmunk years, even in real life. We're fucking living through one right now. So you know
It's
what?
true.
We can all just be miserable together for various different reasons. But I think that's a really nice way to wrap it up, because it really is exciting that we're sitting halfway, or to be objective, 3 years into the Switch's life, and we're already so positive on it.
Mm-hmm.
And the future it is impossible that the future does not hold more of what we already have.
Yeah.
And even, let's just play this scenario out for a second.
Okay.
This year in 2020, we have gotten New Horizons, Clubhouse Games, Paper Mario, The Origami King, as new games. And we've got fucking Xenoblade Definitive Edition. We've got Tokyo Mirror Sessions DX. We've got fucking, what's it? Pokemon Mystery Dungeon.
Yep.
That's 6 games. Imagine if we got 3 more years of 6 games. That's 18 games that we could love. In worst case scenario.
Yeah.
The point I'm making here is that there is not a possibility that the next 3 years of Switch make the overarching life cycle a categorical disappointment.
Yeah.
Because we already had so many successful games, and we're gonna have more, and It's gonna be okay, and we're gonna get great things. If we get GameCube games on Switch, I'm gonna fucking lose my gourd.
I'd love to see you lose your guard for once. That would be incredible.
That's basically all I have to say. We've said
Yeah,
a
I'm,
lot.
I'm pretty much done. We've talked about this for a very long time, but
I'm
I
very
think that's
passionate.
emblematic about how much we care about this and how much there is to talk about. Because Nintendo is a company that has
Nintendo is a
more.
company,
Yeah, it certainly is that, but it has
and the Nintendo
more
Switch has games.
consistently successful IPs. Nintendo Switch sure as fuck does have games. More successful IPs and ones that I'm excited for, and I think the general industry as a whole is excited for, than honestly any other company. Looking back at years for the PlayStation 4, they usually have 2 or 3 tentpole titles, and then other than that, third parties take over. But Nintendo is their first and third parties essentially in one basket. Their third parties are by all intents and purposes first party studios because they're exclusives. Pokemon is a first party Nintendo series. We're not gonna sit down and argue that. Xenoblade is, Fire Emblem is. These games are not made by Nintendo, but they are so heavily associated with Nintendo that there's nothing to worry about. I don't know what that meant, but
It's
what
almost
I'm
like there's
trying
a
to
term
say,
called second party exclusives.
yes, but what I'm trying to get at is that Nintendo is so solid in what they can do that I see that I have a bright look ahead for the future. But I'm ranting, raving, and rambling at this point.
I will end by saying what I always have to say. If you don't want to play on your Switch, it's all right.
Go
Just
play
fucking
Star Fox 64.
just play Star Fox 64. You beat
Yeah.
me to it.
Yep.
But guys, thank you so much for listening.
You're not used to doing the outro, are you?
No.
Okay. Well, I think that does it. All right. See you guys later.
Don't forget us.
Don't forget me. Elbows.
I like your elbows.
Yeah,
Let's compare elbows.
I'm an elbow stan.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is the content people really want to see.
Mm-hmm.
Elbow banter.